What I'm going to talk to you about today is not only this company, Kenjooya, but Kenjooya is just part of an overall story of entrepreneurship, and I think that's probably the unifying theme of everyone here. So, one last thing I'll say before I jump into it is I really, envy is not the right word, but you're at a very beautiful point in life, right? You've got a lot of opportunities and roads in front of you. I liken it to sort of the candy store effect where you could get some of this, you could get some of that. And that can also be very paralyzing. It can be intimidating. You can't eat all the candies, right? So you have to start making decisions. And to me, that means you start closing some doors and opening others. And that's just such a beautiful time. And whatever I can do, as I said, here, today, tomorrow, forever, this type of mentorship is something that I really enjoy doing and take a great deal of pride in. And or using technology. Is it that one? Cool. Yeah. So I don't need my glasses, actually. All right. Boom. Okay. So in terms of what we're going to talk about today, I wanted to lay it out for you so you know what you're getting into. I'm going to start with some general rules. There's a lot of wiggly noises. Why don't I just hold this? Yeah, exactly. Now you can hear my palm. Okay. We're going to start with some rules for what is a good idea, right? Your primary course of what we're going to be looking at. And I'm going to tell you the story of Kenjooya, which is this company that I'm involved with. Then how, Erik's going to take over and talk a little bit about how we evolved it from an idea into a business. I have some takeaways on tactical entrepreneurship, which is how to start a company, some really simple questions I think that get asked that have very, very nuanced answers. And then we'll wrap it all up with some takeaways. So let's start. My first set of things to talk about is a rule of three, right? Things make sense in threes and it actually works together. And really your job is to understand how to take an idea all the way through to a great business, right? And this point is the point that probably I live, eat, and breathe the most. Every business is super, super hard. There is no such thing as a shortcut in entrepreneurship. There is a glamorous view of entrepreneurship outside of Silicon Valley, outside of Provo, outside of New York, where there's some centers of entrepreneurship. People think that it's just you start something, you get like a whole bunch of some other person's money, you spend it, you have foosball and pinball and like free drinks and everything works out, and then you get bought by Google for $10 trillion. And it all works out in like 12 months. And I'll tell you here right now that that's an entire fallacy. You hear about those because they're so rare. They are the case study of something that shouldn't actually have happened. What it really is business, whether you're running a restaurant or you're starting a technology startup, it's going to take a lot more out of you than you could ever imagine. And I think it's important to know that going into it, such that you're not surprised, such that you don't feel like you're the weird one that's spending more time, more energy, more money than you possibly thought could matter. Two is relevant for what you guys are doing today. When I did my Mayfield Fellowship, I did a whole bunch of book learning on what it means to be an entrepreneur. I read hundreds and hundreds of case studies, thousands of pages of texts. And every professor has their view of what it is to start a company, and I'm kind of playing that role even here today, right? So I'm part of the problem in a weird way. The point being is that all those things are really important. The book learning is very, very valuable, and as are the things that the book will tell you, which is you probably want to have something differentiable. You want to be in an environment that's growing, not shrinking. You want to have a particularly smart business model. But that's not enough, and it gets to sort of this last point, which is the most touchy-feely one. And I put it this way, you need to fall in love with the business that you're starting. If it's going to take longer and it's going to require everything you've ever learned and then some, guess what? You're getting married. And I've found no better, I married myself and I have a kid, and I've found no better example of a similarity to starting a business than being in a relationship. And what is the song, Love Will Keep Us Together, right? Like, business is going to throw all kinds of garbage at you that you didn't expect. It's going to be fights with your best friends. It's going to be running out of money or panicking at 3 in the morning. And unless you actually care about what you're doing at a very deep level, not just for the money, not just for being on a magazine cover, you're not going to power through. You're going to break in half. And so those 3 points I'll touch back again through the course of this presentation, the course of a half hour or so. This is a gigantic picture. And so what I want to do now is I want to step into, last time we did this was much smaller. What I want to step into is the story of my company, Kenjooya. Kenjooya is a broken Japanese word for roughly house of emotion. And for those of you that now know Japanese, don't call me out on that, it is very broken, but you'll get a sense of why that is the name of the company. I'll walk you through a journey. Starting a company is a story. You don't just wake up and pull something out of the phone book and start a company. For me, I want you to think that one day you go to bed, or one night you go to bed, you're totally fine. You wake up the next morning, and I want you to imagine wearing someone else's shoes. Imagine that you wake up and let's just say that your eye is dysfunctional. Let's say this is how you're seeing. Your right eye is just completely screwed up. And you don't have any idea why. You wake up, you wash, you shower, you put stuff in it, you put tea bags on it, nothing works, it's blurry, it hurts, the vision's all messed up. And you ask your friends, they make you feel even worse. They go, I've never had something like that, I've never heard of something like that. Or they suggest even more nefarious things like, wow, that might be a brain tumor. And so you're panicking and you fight it through for a whole day. You end up at WebMD at 2 in the morning, like most everyone does. I think WebMD is the worst site on the internet. I'm very proud to make that claim because every single page at WebMD leads to go to doctor immediately. You have a week to live, right? So a terrible experience. Everything's making you feel scared, all because something that you didn't anticipate happened in your life. And this situation isn't a made-up one. It's a very common one. Happened to a very close friend of mine. And that happening is what led down a path of everything else that we're going to talk about. In this case, you go to the doctor and you tell them your symptoms, and it turns out you have some form of optic neuritis, and that's a very leading indicator for multiple sclerosis. And that whole process of fearing and running into change you didn't anticipate, and then sitting in the cold doctor's office, and then being pulled back and saying, hey, we have to talk, and then going home and realizing, wow, I've just been given what feels like a life sentence. If you don't know this illness, it is, quite frankly, a very, very damaging condition, right? It affects the brain and central nervous system, and ultimately in random ways, and people are in wheelchairs at 20 years old, or worse, or better, quite frankly. It's all over the place. But even this one, where almost 3 million people, unfortunately, have this condition, where 200 more people will have it by the end of today, it's incredibly isolating. You feel like you're the only one going through it. And so, as I kind of lived this experience by proxy through my very dear friend, I was just so frustrated by it. I mean, I was, of course, the human emotions of fear and anxiety and what's going to happen and sadness and anger, that whole cycle. But I felt like I had to do something about it. I couldn't just sit on it. And you guys mentioned my training before. I have a computer science undergrad. I have a management in master's. I'm sorry, management and master's. That makes no sense. Management of business is my master's. I had an idea that maybe I could pull together some informational resources using some of my programming skills, using some of my marketing and business skills to help reduce this feeling of isolation that I think my friend was representative of. And I pulled together this, and it's not a fake thing, it's a website called This Is a Mess. I'm kind of embarrassed to put it up there, we'll talk about that a little bit later. It doesn't look particularly beautiful, but it's quite functional. And what I did is I pulled out all the research that was happening against this condition, which it turns out is a lot. And would go through it and essentially as a layperson explain, hey, this study out of UCLA says that if you take this vitamin, you have less fatigue in the afternoon, and it's double-blinded and a good study. Or there's a drug coming in even 10 years from now that can help eradicate some of the root causes. I mean, the gist being that every day 10,000 plus people are going to work motivated to eradicate this condition. And believe it or not, that knowledge isn't well shared. That if you're a patient of a condition, I hope you're not, but if you are, you know what I'm saying is true. If you go to your specialist, they don't sit down and talk to you about all the cool research that's coming. There's reasons of liability, there's reasons of respect, there's reasons of them just assuming you're not going to understand. But there's an enormous loss there of not knowing all of this wonderful knowledge. And just the idea that there's this going on gives you hope. So I created this website as a moonlighting, and I'd come home at night, and this was what I'd be excited to work on, look at all the research. And again, it was personally and professionally motivated. And I want to make a point before I leave that, and this is kind of a cheesy way of explaining it. That website was clearly not, a Snapchat, right? It was not a beautiful, elegant design. I got it up and I got the information out. It was black and white TV, not 3D HD TV. And so I did this for a while. I was working my day job as a product manager at a networking company. I like to say sort of making a rich person slightly richer every day, working my job. And I got an email. And this email, I didn't reproduce the whole thing, but I pulled out a few key lines. This email was from a user of that multiple sclerosis website that I created. Came out of the blue. I never put my name on that website, and so it was like, Dear Webmaster. It really wasn't to anyone in particular. And the gist of this note, and you can read it, it was a gentleman that had the condition, was in a wheelchair, and he said he was at the point of taking his own life the night before. He had had it for a decade, and he just couldn't deal with it anymore. He said something compelled him to search one more time. We all know what that something is, but it compelled him to search one more time, found the website, And he said, for the first time in a decade, he was up all night reading and he got a glimmer of hope. And he just wanted to say thank you. And this was the reaction I had to reading that, right? I get chills. It's been 10 years since that happened. I still get chills telling that story, right? It was a complete slap across the face. It's something I did in my, most weakest of hours, between 11 and 12 o'clock at night after a long day of work that I thought was hideous and really didn't impress particularly, had in this case apparently saved a life, right? And rule number 3, if you think back to the beginning of the presentation, fall in love. I fell in love with this idea of connecting people through technology. And so then I thought, okay, this is powerful. I'm emotionally engaged. And is there something bigger here, right? I was picking on that one particular condition because I had a personal interest in it. But I really had a sneaking suspicion that there was a lot more going on, right, than this one. Everyone goes through something, right? Everyone's going through something right now in this room, right? We can't particularly openly talk about it, but we're all going through something. And I thought, is there an opportunity to take this same simple concept and bring it to more and more people so more and more people can write emails like that? Not to me, but to anyone. And I think it's sobering to think about what's going on in life, right? Life is this highly dynamic environment. And just in the next 30 minutes, right, 1,000 people are going to get a life-altering diagnosis of cancer. 400 people are going to be apart from the person that they thought they were going to love forever. And 30,000 people are going to be parents in like 45 minutes, right? And so you think, wow, there's so much experience happening. Each one of those things would be better with others, right? It would be better with people that got it. And so I started to think and look at the research and the psychology of how humans sort of build their relationships, build their support networks. And it really breaks out quite simply. We are a product of our experiences. There's just no doubt about it. On the left-hand side, you got these wonderful things like being a dad and rescuing dogs and climbing rocks. On the right-hand side, well, you know what? That's the reality that creeps into our lives that we'd like to pretend doesn't. People get divorced. People get conditions. People really dislike their coworkers or their schoolmates or perhaps professors, right? And so if you look at the left side of things, or the green side of things, that's Facebook, that's Twitter, that's Snapchat, that's Pinterest, right? It's like life is good. I'm the coolest, most best looking, my friends vacation in the awesomest spots. Everything is just roses all the time. It's amazing how many roses are in life. And if you look at sort of the right side, well, this is what actually makes us who we are, right? It's challenges that we go through together, spiritually, physically, that make us who we are, bond us with people that we become lifelong friends with. And this whole right side, then and still now, entirely unaddressed in the social web. And so I like to make this point, sorry if I offend anyone, you're not a unique snowflake, right? We've been told our entire lives as Americans that we are special and wonderful and brilliant and no one's ever been like us and no one will ever be like us again. And I have to say, I'm an engineer by training. That just can't be true. There's 7 billion people on this planet. There's 110 billion people that have come before us. Yes, in some superficial ways we might be different, but at the root of it, people have gone through the experiences that we've gone through. They get it, they get us, but we often don't cross paths with them. In fact, we almost never cross paths with those people. And so that's what became the beginnings of this company, was to take an idea that had focused on one particular condition, helping a group of folks learn more, ultimately, about what was going on. The byproduct of that was a human connection. The knowledge created a community between myself and the users, and also the users amongst themselves. And then the idea that, man, I could expand this thing and reach people who are just going generically through experiences. And the more of those that I could find that connect people, the stronger the relationship. So I could take person X and person Y and find out they have all these things in common using our simple technology. And what happens out of that is their life becomes a better place as they find that they're understood, they get support, and they grow from that. And so, wow, I'm like feeling really good at this point, right? I've put together an idea, a hypothesis, I can grow it, but I still have to run it through rule 2, which was textbook learning, right? And so before running out and doing something impulsively and quitting my job and starting an experience type website, I really checked out what would this play out. And so I used the word TAM, total available market. It was huge, right? How many people have experiences? Everyone. How many experiences do we have? Zillions. Do we keep having them? Yes. So, okay, we're not going to run out of experiences if that's the main idea here. One of our investors is a godfather of Silicon Valley. His name is Ron Conway. And his maxim here has served me very, very well. For any sort of product or property that is dealing with people, ultimately, and social, and it's if you take an offline behavior, something we do as people naturally, and you find a way to bring that behavior into an online environment where either it's cheaper or better or faster or more thorough, then you're working in essentially, what do you call it? You're going downstream. It's easier, right? Because you're not trying to convince people to do something they're not used to. And the last thing, of course, and it shouldn't be the last thing, it should be pretty top of mind, is can we make this thing sustainable, right? Is there a way to monetize this thing? It really, coming from Silicon Valley, I'm highly allergic to people in Silicon Valley because this last point is often just ignored or laughed at. Raising other people's money with no idea and spending it with no idea that how you're going to make yourself viable and just saying, we'll think about business later, to me is a very unhealthy way of creating a business. It's a healthy way of creating an idea or a project, very unhealthy way of creating a business. And so for us, advertising and data opportunities started to become very obvious. People are telling you their experiences. That's exactly what marketers enjoy understanding. And obviously, this is a very different way of connecting people through experience and emotion. Perhaps there's some interesting data out of there. And so voila, a website called Experience Project was created. This is not just a baby idea. We've taken this thing to 20 million people a month using it. I hope people in this room are using it. We've had over 40 million life experiences shared. We never talk about specific revenues. It's not what private companies do, but it's not insignificant. And it's a top 150 website and app, so it actually has worked very, very well in the mobile world, as well as the desktop environment. And so, we built something, and I want to touch this point, right, away from the book learning back to sort of the soul, right? I hope you can get a sense. Money chasing is not my primary passion, right? Building something that could be wildly profitable for the purposes of extracting that profit from my bank account, not my passion. And so, making something that does that first bullet point is my passion. So 4 out of 5 of our users of this property say the site has changed their life for the better. We've gotten thousands upon thousands of those letters, emails that say the site has saved their life. The site has made them feel that the world can be good. There's an enormous amount of positivity that's come out of this idea, this simple idea of connecting people on all of their experiences, good and bad. And so, I want a point to be made here, particularly in an environment like this where we care in this room about being good as well as being successful. Revenue does not have to be this bipolar, either I'm like, Gordon Gekko and I'm all about greed is good, or I'm just Mr., California yoga pants and barefoot campfires where I feel like web properties should just serve humanity. Revenue can be right down the middle, right? Revenue can be something that finances the accomplishment of your vision. So it's not a boogeyman. And wanting to make sure you take care of it isn't a bad thing. In fact, my team, very similar culture to myself, if I got up there on our Friday meetings and said, hey, we're just going to work extremely hard to make an extra $100,000 this quarter, that wouldn't motivate anyone at all. But if I explain it this way, which is, hey, if we make it a little bit extra money, we can maybe do a little bit better job on the product, that makes sense. It's a very, very sort of powerful leap. So I'm going to step aside for a few minutes. I'm going to let Erik actually walk you through what he's been responsible for, which is taking those baby concepts of maybe there's a business here and turning them into a pretty successful reality.
Yeah, thank you very much. Armen's a tough act to follow, but he's a very modest guy. This will be enjoyable. So one of the things when I stepped into Experience Project, which it was called at the time in 2008, is what I identified very quickly on is there were a lot of users coming to the site and being very expressive, being very emotive in the way that they were connecting. At that time, we were a few million people, and people coming in and spending an average of 1,600 characters per submission, right, per story, and watching the world kind of come alive and connecting around their experiences. And any business class you take, you'll recognize this S-curve very quickly, right? And so what we had is a large web property that people were coming into, and we quickly said, okay, why don't we run advertising against this? We have hundreds of millions of impressions. There's ways we can make millions of dollars within this. Well, that's a very obvious business model. One of the biggest things that we get pushed on from the board and being in Silicon Valley and aligned with the Twitters, the Googles, the Facebook, Snapchats within a mile radius of us is you always have to introduce innovative business models. And so we kind of looked at what we were doing. In an innovative business model, you see this play out in the market often with someone like Apple, right? Apple comes and introduces a computer. They run along this S-curve, and then they go, oh, well, how many Apple computers am I really going to sell? I better introduce something. And the introduction of something else is actually another S-curve, right? I'm going to go introduce the iPad. And so they introduce the iPad, build it up, develop it, optimize it, and they kind of just, they almost exhaust the market opportunity. So then they introduce the iPad, and they keep going on. Same thing with Amazon. I'm going to start with books, sell general products, and then start selling data. But you see the constant introduction of these S-curves within businesses. And so we looked at what we had, right? Experience Project was growing when I joined, Armen and a few other guys. It was a few million people. But there was a massive amount of content within that. First, we had 3, 4, 5 million stories submitted. But all of a sudden, when we started realizing, hey, we had 10 million submissions within our site, we knew we had something very valuable. In contrast, a big site like Wikipedia, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, has about 4 million articles in the English language. We have over 40 million submissions now globally of how people are expressing and talking about just about every topic. So we have this massive social property. Looking outside of that, we knew we wanted to innovate a business model on top of it. And so we knew that we could learn from our data. And this wasn't just necessarily listening, it was allowing people to train us in how they were using words, how they were expressing themselves. When someone uses the word cool in Minnesota and someone uses the word cool in Los Angeles and then cool in London, what is the context of those words? What is that word in association? What's innuendo? The elements of sarcasm? What could we learn from how people were expressing themselves? And so we start to learn from our data. And this is actually like a visual representation of what we're doing. We're taking billions and billions of pieces of data and we're correlating or associating with particular emotions. So when someone comes in and they're expressive, we know that type of person. When the 32-year-old mom from Colorado who is frustrated in her marriage uses certain words of expression, we are learning from her and building models off that. So what you actually see is what we're doing. These massive billions of points actually tied into emotions, and they're constantly changing. Like our data scientists say, humans are wizards with words, right? Every single day, the context and how we use words changes every single minute. And so we knew we wanted to build from our data. If you look at the makeup of our team, we're based in downtown San Francisco. We're about 40, 50 people now. The vast majority are Stanford folks, data scientists, engineers. I'm one of the few business guys that actually get to go out and tell a story and try to craft it to make sure that we always are focused on revenue. And we knew with this, this developing theme within the market of big data, well, we had a very emotive technology. We had a very emotive data source, right, with an experience project. And if we could design technology on top of that, to be able to read emotion, behavior, intent within data, we knew the applications were vast, right? Because when someone comes in Google and they say, hey, I just lost my dog, they're not necessarily looking for a dog replacement. They're looking for people to be sympathetic, right? There's an emotional response from that we're able to go ahead and design and understand. And so what we did with Stanford's Computer Science and Linguistics Department was we started, looking at this level of expression on Experience Project and writing technology or algorithms on top of it. So we could then take this technology and deploy it on Facebook, Twitter, any type of data to be able to read emotion within it. And what we had is this incredibly powerful technology that was being powered by over 20 million people per month and growing at over 5% month over month. So more and more people were coming in. They were expressing themselves. We were delivering a value there, as Armen talks about. And we're also introducing this very groundbreaking technology that is able to go ahead and be like, okay, this is how people are feeling, right? And the business applications would be someone like Verizon. Verizon has over 50,000 emails every day within their customer center that come in, right? And to be able to prioritize back that off of emotion is very valuable to them, right? To be like, all right, here's the calls that are confused, here are the people that are angry, here are the people that are elated. Every single one of those behaviors has a correlating action that needs to be followed upon. If someone's confused, we'll follow up with that individual and make sure that the marketing message is correct. If people are elated, we'll upsell them. Or if people are very upset, prioritize them and make sure that you address their issues. And so we introduced, Kenjooya, which means house of emotion. And it's what we're really focused on, right? A technology that's able to understand and reveal emotion within data and a massive web property that powers all that technology. We went out to the market and said, look at what we're sitting on. This is extremely valuable. And we had incredible companies come to us and saying, we're intrigued. How can we work with you? Microsoft, Adobe, Walmart, Chevrolet, right? It's kind of the who's who right now. They're saying, hey, this isn't something that's going away. More and more data is created every day. Every time someone tweets, every time someone calls into a call center, every time someone talks to an employee over email, more and more data is occurring within this world, and people are finding ways people want to find ways to get actionable around it. How does it become more granular? How do we make sense of this data? And so we partner with a lot of these companies to actually deploy our technology to help them make their data actionable. Actually, I'll pass it over to Armen now for raising money.
So, where's the clicker? All right, so hopefully we walk you through just a teaser of what we do. It's not the most straightforward company, to be honest with you, right? So we're happy to take questions about that in the Q&A and dig deeper and then say how did we evolve from social to include data and really be both a consumer and enterprise company under the same roof with 40 people, which is a pretty big challenge that I'm happy to wax poetic on. So let's get into a little bit more of the tactics of the starting the company, right? And I'll have just 3 of these slides with a few points on each. These are my extreme opinions. I am highly opinionated about this stuff. I've been through many wars on this. I've been through many coaching sessions with hundreds of other startups. So this is some of my distilled knowledge. Hopefully it'll be useful to you. And you can look at the set of other speakers and see how it compares. Raising money, this is venture capital or angel capital. This is basically taking someone else's money to build your business. And really, that's the key word is, do I really need to? Raising money is not a goal, in my opinion. This is, again, perhaps I'm in the minority of thinking that. We've done 4 rounds of investment in our company. And each time, it's kind of like a birthday and kind of like a funeral. And the reason I say that is you're celebrating that you're an exciting new business, right? People are putting money into it at increasingly high valuations. And you're getting to build your dream financed by someone else's capital. Why are you mourning? Well, you're selling a part of your company to a group of people that you don't perhaps know that well, that may have different opinions than you. And it also really, let's be honest, it means that your business model is not working as well as you wanted it to in most cases, right? In most cases, raising money, it's not acceleration capital, it's oxygen. Meaning you need it to survive, to make payroll, to keep the lights on. You're not using it to say, hey, I'm making $1 trillion, I want to make $2 trillion. And so really when you are at the beginning stages of the company, you're losing money. You're raising money not for acceleration, really, you're raising it for oxygen. And you have to go through this exercise of, do I need to raise it, assuming that you can. My simplest way of trying to turn this into a binary decision is if you have the resources, whether that be people, skills, some capital, to get your idea to the point where a business model is alive and kicking, do not raise money until that point, right? I don't know who said it, but it's a maxim I know well, which is a startup can be defined as an idea in search of a business, right? A startup can't be a company that's making tons and tons of money and cranking. It still hasn't found its product market fit. If you found your product market fit, and you can avoid raising capital, do it. You don't need it. If you do not have your ideas, like your Snapchat, you have no idea how you're ever going to make money, you better raise capital or you never get anywhere. Part 2, you got to build something. I'm very, very much a stickler for this. I know more folks in this room are non-engineers than engineers, so perhaps this is a slightly bitter pill, but going and trying to get people excited about an idea on a piece of paper is tangibly different than going and getting people excited about an app you can pull up on your iPhone. Obvious, right? It's emotional connection. You can see that they're doing something. There's credibility there. So if there's any way, by hook or by crook, by taking some online courses, by taking some classes here, to get some basic coding knowledge, or at least put up a demo of some sort, building something will give you an enormous advantage over 90% of the population. Using any network you can find, this is an obvious one. I would just put an exclamation point on this by saying the first money that we raised at Kenjooya didn't happen because I picked up the phone and called up some cool VC at Kleiner Perkins. I happened to mention it at lunch to a friend who played poker with another friend who had a one-time guest at the poker tournament that turned out to be my first investor. There's just no way you can capture how that's going to happen. And if you don't think actively that I'm going to tell people and that any person can be helpful about what I'm working on, you're not going to get there. And then this last point, this is really hard, right? This is setting expectations honestly. It applies towards raising capital as well as running a company. I think honesty is a virtue we all hold dear here. But it's hard to do this when you're trying to get people excited about your idea, you're right? One person's using, or two people are using your app, you're like, people are using my app, right? You'll just round it up to these ridiculous things. So you have one customer, you'll be like, people are clamoring, we can't handle the demand, our salespeople are handcuffed. You'll make up all kinds of things to just make it seem better, and you want to believe it. And what happens is your investors may be naive and be like, wow, that company's on the verge of selling to Google for $2 trillion. I better invest at a $1,000 valuation now. And then guess what happens? They invest, and now you have to deal with them when they realize that's not where things are. So resist that temptation to overblow what you're doing. Building out the team is another major part of it, of 2 of the 3 things I'll talk about. This is a key question that I think many of you will encounter in your journey of entrepreneurship. Should I just do it myself? should I hire some people or should I bring on co-founders? There's actually a big difference between hiring people and co-founders. A co-founder will share the equity in the company, right? So if there's 4 co-founders at the beginning, each one of you will own presumably 25% of the company. If you just said, I'm going to own the company, I'm going to hire people, you will own 100%. Your employees will work for money. And so there's a very simple rubric here as well that simplifies thousands and thousands of pages of research. To me, it's if a core part of what your company will be doing is not encapsulated in your skill set, you better have a co-founder. And example to make it concrete, if your product is going to be a data science product, like we just talked about, and you are not a data scientist, hiring that key skill will be not a right way to go. You want someone who's just as excited about you, who feels ownership in the company, to be part of that equation. So this will look a little bit out of order. My second point, avoiding stealth mode. Stealth mode is probably not as prevalent as it used to be. I rail against this concept of stealth mode. This is the idea, and you've seen it. This is generally internet companies do this to act cool. They won't tell you what they do. They'll just put up a website. It'll be a really cool logo that they paid a lot of money for, and then it'll be like jobs question mark, right? And you'll like apparently submit a resume to a company that has no explanation. And this stealth mode concept is a almost like a fraternity trick, in my opinion, where you go, yeah, we're in stealth. We don't say what we do. If your idea is so weak that someone overhearing it in a bar could threaten the very existence of your passion, of your idea, of your execution, you shouldn't do that idea, right? There are, I'm sure, exceptions to this rule where you're working on something that is a Google killer and you're a Google campus and you probably don't want to talk about it there. You can be stealthy there. But in general, walking around saying I'm working on something really secretive, I don't really want to say it, it to me reveals more weakness than strength. And it also affects what we talked about on the last slide of talk to everyone you know about what you're doing so you can network. That third point, pillars of culture, it should make a lot of sense to you guys. The first people you bring into a company will set the tone and culture for everyone else. And it's really easy to focus myopically on your next week, on your next month, or your next quarter, and be like, oh, no, that totally mercenary programmer person that acts like a complete jerk in the office, I can tolerate that because I just need to get a product out. Well, guess what? The next person that gets hired is going to be just like that jerk, because that's who they see in the office, right? Your alternative is, Erik is one of the finest people I know on this planet. First person to join my company, our CTO is my best friend, Neil. Best person I've ever run across. And what a surprise, the rest of our team has picked up those traits of being wickedly smart, but also really, really, really fundamentally good people. And I feel like I get better being around them. And that's not something that you can trade away in the pursuit of a business. And this last one's super tactical. Up until about a year and a half ago, I had no operations support in a 40-person company. So I did payroll, I did insurance, I also ran the company, I also did sales and marketing, and I even did programming, right? And so this is because a first-time entrepreneur, you're very insecure. You don't want to spend money on things that you don't feel like you can justify. And what you end up doing is murdering yourself as the entrepreneur and doing everything possible. And it requires a hand from someone else to say, you know what? Your time could be better spent building better products than writing payroll checks, even if you have to spend some money on it. So this last point, I've never done this in a presentation, so I hope it works out. And I call this whole thing soul care. And this is the fact that you as an entrepreneur are a human. You're not a robot. You're not just executing a set of orders. And it's not as easy as we're going to think it is, right? So we talked about at the very beginning. So I have a few points here on you, and I almost feel like I have to listen to this myself. Is to do as I say, not as I do, right? So there's a really foreign concept to most people called getting a coach. And it sounds stupid, and it's one of the things where you don't scrimp on key hires. There are people in all types of entrepreneurial environments that have done it before. And they're in it for the love of the game. And it's very easy to tell the difference between people that are in it for the love of the game, of starting something from scratch and making it successful, and then people that are in it to get into newspaper or magazine articles or to make a lot of money. You will be able to discern that. I think you guys have that ability to pick that out. And if you find people that are in it for the love of the game, they are your foil. When you have an issue, which you will have daily, minutely, hourly, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I went through this. What about, it's back to the idea of experience project. You're connecting with someone who shares your experience, and ignoring that is a very dangerous thing to do. This second point, to me, is very humorous. I made a rule, like at the beginning of in 2013. I would go to conferences, particularly startup conferences, particularly with young startup founders. And I'm not that old, so I don't feel like this is a crotchety, get off my lawn kind of point. But I would basically talk to people. I'd be like, what are you working on? Blah, blah, blah. And either they would say something like, oh, it's really stealth. I can't tell you. So I'd be like, oh, no. Or it would be part two. They'd be like, oh, we're killing it. No matter what they were doing, right? They were mowing lawns or they were like designing the next social network, they were killing it. And it's always the two words, killing it. And it started to irritate me like the worst possible way, because the longer you spend in entrepreneurship, the longer you spend building companies, you start to realize that nobody is killing it. Everyone is in a struggle. Business is hard. Taking money from a person for a service is not easy. And you have to calibrate yourself. When a two-person company tells you they're killing it, right, you go, all right, like you think you're killing it, right, because you got a good phone call, maybe you had a good meeting with Macy's. Doesn't mean they're signing a check, doesn't mean your company's going to succeed. And inevitably, these killing it people are looking for jobs like within a few months. So I steer clear of these people. The second someone says they're killing it, I basically find a way to excuse myself from the conversation, because it just isn't worth it, honestly. I'm happy to coach people who can understand that there's humility involved in starting a company. And I'll leave it with one other point, which is right now, pick a successful internet company. Pick LinkedIn, pick Twitter, Facebook, your company is right out in the backyard, Qualtrics, Domo. There's someone right now not sleeping at night, even though they're at a really successful company, because they are terrified about what comes next. Twitter's worth what, $40 billion with very little revenue. They're probably freaking out on how do we keep this up. So always remember, whoever says they're killing it, huge grain of salt on that. And this last point, this takes a while to understand, and it was actually probably the most powerful learning I've ever had in entrepreneurship, which is that pressure on you, if you've raised money or if you haven't, on your family, on your relationships, on your constant mind, because as you build an idea, inevitably every other conversation is like, oh, have you seen company X? They do what you do. All right? It's just a constant set of people that aren't trying to hurt you, but it's chipping away at you. That pressure is hard to deal with, and you feel like it's all in you. Like you have to make it all work. There's more to the world than your company. You all know that here, particularly, but this is hard. You lose sight of this, and this is like do as I say, not as I do. You have to understand that not only emotionally the world goes on if your company succeeds or fails, but you are one of a zillion companies. No matter how cool or special, and remember, we're not a unique snowflake. If an investor put money into your company, they invested in like 20 other companies, right? They have a portfolio, there's a word for it, right? So they're expecting most of the companies that they work with to not succeed. So if you can relax a little bit and know that you're doing good with that money, you're working hard, and you're working honestly, and you're part of a larger storyline, it puts some perspective and removes a little bit of that point pressure. So those are some points. I have just a few key takeaways past that. As you explore, because I think the juncture that you're more likely to come across in the near future is, should I go start a company? For me, finding opportunity and change is inevitable. I gave a TED Talk about change that's been viewed about almost 250,000 times. It's something I'm very, very passionate about. Change happens to people, whether it be an illness, whether it be graduating school, whether it be having a baby. Change happens, and it's almost always not in your hands when that change happens. Great entrepreneurs will find opportunity in that change. They will mourn whatever negative thing that comes from it, but they will find an opportunity in that change like we did. You don't have to be perfect. If I had taken the time to say this hideousness that is this website, which still exists, by the way, in fact, it's more hideous now. If I had taken the time to say, no, I can't let this out. I got to make it clean and beautiful and elegant design and have all the right affordances, that person that wrote me that email, I mean, this is serious, right? The person that wrote me the email might not be on this planet today if I had wasted time on things that didn't matter. So you should just go. Don't have to be perfect, but it's a bargain, right? You can't take one side of the equation, which is I'm just not going to be perfect and be sloppy, without a commitment to improve relentlessly. So get something out, but then commit yourself to, I will make this better every single minute of every single day, as long as I can. And remember, the road's long. It doesn't have to be an artificial timeline or deadline. You are going to be on a journey as an entrepreneur, and it will take a lot longer than you think. Hang in there. The rewards are definitely there if you believe and love what you do. So that's our presentation aspect. I hope that's been useful to you guys, and I really look forward to Q&A, actually.